The Prisoner's Gift. Part 1. The Mysterious Gift. Marcus had always been an ordinary man. He worked as a carpenter in a small town, and his life was simple. He spent his days fixing broken furniture, building houses, and enjoying quiet nights with his family. But one day, everything changed. It was a sunny afternoon when Marcus was arrested. He was accused of a crime he didn't commit, stealing money from a local bank. He knew it wasn't true. He had been home all day, working on a new project for his neighbor, Mrs. Davis. She could vouch for him, but when the police came, they didn't listen to her. They had already decided he was guilty. The trial was quick. The judge didn't give Marcus much chance to explain himself. The evidence seemed to point directly at him, and no one believed his story. Within a few hours, Marcus was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was taken away in handcuffs, and his life was turned upside down. The prison was a dark and cold place. The walls were high, and the gates were heavy. The guards were strict and unfriendly. Marcus didn't know anyone there, and he quickly realized how dangerous it could be. The other prisoners looked at him with suspicion, and he could hear whispers about how new prisoners were often used as targets for bullying. But one night, something strange happened. As Marcus lay on his hard bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, he felt a strange sensation in his mind. It was like a soft voice, just out of reach, but it wasn't speaking. It was more like a feeling, a thought that wasn't his own. He shook his head, thinking it was just his imagination. The next morning, Marcus went to the cafeteria for breakfast. As he stood in line, he heard someone behind him. "You don't belong here," a man's voice whispered in his ear. It wasn't the voice of the prisoner behind him, but it felt so real. He spun around, but no one was there. Marcus began to feel something was wrong. Could it be the stress of prison life? Or was there something more to it? As he ate his breakfast, the voice came again, but this time it was clearer. "I know what happened," it said, and Marcus froze. He didn't recognize the voice, but the words were comforting, like someone was trying to help him. He looked around, but the other prisoners were busy eating, completely unaware of the strange sensation that had taken over his mind. After breakfast, Marcus went back to his cell, his mind racing. Who was speaking to him, and why? Was it a hallucination, or was something else happening? He had no answers, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this strange new power was connected to the prison in some way. That night, as he lay in bed again, trying to sleep, the voice returned. This time, it spoke clearly, as if it was right beside him. "I have given you a gift, Marcus. Use it wisely." Marcus's heart raced. He sat up in bed, looking around his cell. There was no one there. But the voice continued, "You can hear their thoughts. You can hear the truth. But be careful. There are many secrets in this prison, and some truths are better left unknown." Marcus didn't know what to think. Could this be real, or was his mind playing tricks on him? He had to find out more, but something told him he should be careful. The voice had warned him about the dangers of the truth. What was it trying to tell him? As the days passed, Marcus started to experiment with this strange new ability. At first, he only heard small thoughts like what people were thinking about their food or their families. But as time went on, the thoughts grew clearer. He could hear the fears of the other prisoners, their desires, and even their plans. It was both amazing and terrifying. He learned that one of the guards was afraid of being caught for stealing from the prison. A fellow prisoner named Jake was planning to escape. Another prisoner, an old man who sat quietly in the corner, was thinking about how he could take revenge on someone who had wronged him many years ago. Marcus was learning things he shouldn't know. He couldn't stop himself from hearing their thoughts, even if he tried. It was like the gift was becoming stronger, more powerful. But with this power came a sense of fear. The more he heard, the more he realized that the prison was full of lies and secrets. One day, Marcus overheard a conversation between two prisoners. They were talking about him, but they didn't know he could hear them. "Did you hear about Marcus?" One of them whispered. "He's the one who was wrongly accused, right? They say he's a carpenter. But there's something strange about him now. I've noticed it too. He looks like he knows something, like he can hear what we're thinking." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't realized that others might be aware of his new gift. The two prisoners continued their conversation, but Marcus couldn't focus on their words. He was too distracted by the feeling that something was about to change. He had to be careful. The more he listened, the more he learned. But the deeper he went into the minds of the prisoners, the more dangerous it became. And he was beginning to realize that the real crime wasn't just the one he had been accused of. It was something much darker. As he lay in his cell that night, trying to calm his thoughts, Marcus couldn't help but wonder, what had he gotten himself into? Part 2. The Truth Behind the Bars. Days passed, and Marcus' new ability only grew stronger. Every time he tried to shut out the voices in his head, they would return, louder and clearer. The prison, once full of mysterious whispers, was now a constant buzz of thoughts, desires, and secrets. He could hear the thoughts of everyone around him, the prisoners, the guards, even the staff. One morning, as Marcus walked through the prison yard, he overheard a conversation between two guards. They didn't know he could hear them. "I heard that Marcus might be a threat," one guard said. "He's been acting different lately. It's like he can see into our minds." The other guard laughed. "You're just paranoid. He's just another prisoner. He's not going to hurt anyone." But Marcus wasn't so sure. He had heard enough to know that something was wrong. He felt it deep inside. The voices were telling him things that didn't add up. People were hiding things from him, big things. As he listened, one thought kept repeating in his mind. "I need to find out the truth." That night, Marcus lay awake in his small cell, his mind racing. The gift or curse, as he now thought of it, wasn't just about hearing the thoughts of others. It was starting to show him more. He could feel emotions too: fear, anger, sadness, even guilt. And some of these emotions weren't just from the people around him. He was starting to feel his own emotions more deeply as well. It was as if the gift was unlocking something hidden inside him, something he hadn't even known was there. But there was something even more troubling. The deeper he listened, the more he understood that the people in the prison weren't just criminals. They were pawns in a much larger game. The prison itself was a place where people went to disappear, where secrets were buried, and where power was held in the hands of a few. The next day, as Marcus walked down the hallway, he heard a familiar thought. It was coming from Jake, a young prisoner who had been in the prison for a year. Jake was a troublemaker, always fighting, always getting into trouble. But today, Marcus heard something different. Jake wasn't just thinking about his escape plan. He was also thinking about something else, something darker. I can't let him find out, Jake thought, his voice sharp with fear. If Marcus figures it out, everything will fall apart. I'll never get out. Marcus didn't know what Jake meant, but he felt the fear in his voice. Something was happening, something bigger than just one man's escape. As Jake walked by, Marcus tried to catch his eye, but Jake didn't even look at him. He was too focused on his own thoughts, on his own plans. Later that day, Marcus went to the prison library. He had started reading anything he could find. Old books, newspapers, even magazines. Anything that might give him a clue about what was going on in the world outside the prison walls. But as he flipped through a newspaper, he saw a headline that made his heart stop. It was a picture of a man he didn't recognize. But the name under the photo, David Moore, was something he had heard before. David Moore was the man who had accused Marcus of the crime. He was the reason Marcus was sitting in this prison in the first place. The article was old, from a few years ago, but it was about a missing person. David Moore's name was mentioned as a key witness in the case. But there was something strange about the article. It didn't say much about the crime itself. It only mentioned that the case was still under investigation. Marcus' heart pounded in his chest. The man who had accused him was involved in something bigger, something dangerous. But what was it? What was David Moore hiding? As Marcus sat there, thinking, the voice in his head returned. The truth is closer than you think. It whispered, like a soft breeze in his mind. You are not just a prisoner. You are part of a bigger story. Find the pieces and the puzzle will be solved. Marcus didn't know what to make of it. The voice was starting to feel like a guide, but also a warning. He had to be careful. The more he listened, the more he understood that this prison was full of lies, and not just the lies told by the prisoners. The guards, the staff, even the people on the outside, they were all hiding something. But what was the truth? The next day, Marcus decided to take action. He had to find out more about David Moore. He couldn't just sit here in the dark, waiting for answers. He needed to know what was really going on. He began to listen more carefully. As the days passed, he picked up bits and pieces of information. He learned that David Moore was not just a witness in the case. He was connected to someone high up in the prison system, someone with a lot of power. But the more Marcus listened, the more he realized that there were no clear answers. Everyone seemed to be hiding something. One evening, as Marcus sat in the prison yard, he overheard another conversation. This time it was between two guards, talking quietly as they passed by. "You know the truth about Marcus, don't you?" one guard said, his voice low. "He's not just a carpenter. He's part of something much bigger. They've been watching him for years." The other guard looked around nervously. "You mean the people on the outside?" "Exactly," the first guard replied. "He's not the innocent man he appears to be. He's involved in something much darker." Marcus felt his stomach drop. What did they mean? What was he really a part of? As the voice in his mind spoke again, he heard something new. "You are closer to the truth than you realize, Marcus. But beware. There are forces at play that you cannot fight alone." The fear in the voice was real, and it made Marcus realize something important. The truth was not just something he could uncover with his new ability. The truth was dangerous, and uncovering it might cost him more than he was ready to pay. Marcus knew one thing for sure now. He had to find out the truth. But the more he learned, the more he understood how high the stakes were. The gift that had seemed like a blessing was starting to feel like a curse. What was the truth behind his imprisonment? And what had David Moore been hiding all these years? Marcus couldn't stop until he knew the answers, no matter how dangerous the path ahead might be. Part 3. The Unseen Enemy. Marcus couldn't sleep. The thoughts of the guards, the whispers in the prison, and the mysterious voice in his head were all mixing together, creating a storm of confusion. The more he tried to understand, the more questions grew in his mind. Every moment he spent listening to the people around him felt like he was stepping deeper into a web of secrets, and he didn't know who was telling the truth anymore. Everyone seemed to be hiding something. That evening, as Marcus sat in the mess hall, the voices grew louder. Some thoughts were clear, others were jumbled, but all of them seemed to carry a sense of fear. Marcus heard one thought from an old prisoner named Charlie, who always sat in the corner, looking over his shoulder. "Something is coming," Charlie thought, his voice shaking with worry. "I've been here too long. I know how this place works. They're planning something big, and it's gonna hurt everyone." Marcus looked up from his meal. Charlie wasn't just speaking to himself. His eyes were darting around, as if he were trying to find someone, but no one was paying attention to him. It seemed like everyone else was lost in their own thoughts, in their own worlds. Marcus stood up and walked over to Charlie. He didn't know why, but something in Charlie's voice made him feel like he had to speak to him. As he approached, Charlie's eyes widened, and his thoughts grew frantic. "No, stay away from me," Charlie thought, pushing himself back into his seat. Marcus hesitated. "Charlie, No, you don't understand," Charlie whispered, his voice trembling. "They'll come for you too. They're always watching. They'll make sure you don't get out. You'll never see the truth." Charlie's words hit Marcus like a punch. Who was Charlie talking about? Who was they? And why was Charlie so scared? Before Marcus could ask anything else, a guard walked by, and Charlie's thoughts grew quiet, like a door slamming shut. Marcus didn't know what to think. Was Charlie losing his mind? Or was he trying to warn him about something? He didn't have time to figure it out. The voice in his head spoke again. He's not lying, but the truth is deeper than you know. Marcus wasn't sure if the voice was trying to help him or trick him. But there was one thing he knew for sure. The more he learned, the more dangerous everything seemed. The next day, as Marcus walked down the long corridor of the prison, he overheard something that made his heart race. It was the same voice he had heard the day before, the voice of one of the guards. He's getting too close, the guard thought, speaking to himself. We need to stop him before it's too late. Marcus' stomach dropped. They were talking about him. But what did they mean by too close? What was he getting too close to? As he continued walking, he felt a strange sensation in the air. It wasn't just the thoughts that filled his head. There was a tension in the prison, something Marcus couldn't quite explain. The prisoners seemed more on edge than usual. The guards were walking with purpose, and the staff were whispering to each other, their eyes scanning the rooms like they were searching for something or someone. That evening, as Marcus returned to his cell, the voice in his mind spoke again. But this time, it sounded more urgent. You need to leave. The time is coming. They won't stop until you're gone. Marcus felt a shiver run down his back. Leave? Where could he go? He was stuck inside the prison, surrounded by walls that seemed to close in on him more with every passing day. He couldn't escape. Not yet. But the voice was right about one thing. The danger was real, and it was getting closer. Marcus spent the next few days trying to piece together the truth. He couldn't ignore the growing sense of fear inside the prison. The thoughts of the prisoners, the guards, and even the staff were all telling him the same thing. Something terrible was about to happen. He decided to take a risk. He began to use his ability to read minds more carefully, focusing on specific people who might know something important. One day, he overheard a conversation between two of the prison's higher-ranking officers. Marcus is getting too close, one officer said, his voice filled with worry. We need to get rid of him before he uncovers everything. The other officer nodded. He's a threat to everything. We can't let him expose us. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. They were planning something, and it was clear that he was the target. But what were they hiding? What could he possibly expose that was so dangerous? The answers were still out of reach, but the pieces were slowly falling into place. Marcus was beginning to understand that the real enemy wasn't just the people inside the prison. It was something much bigger, something that reached far beyond the walls of his cell. Late that night, as Marcus lay on his bunk, unable to sleep, the voice in his head spoke once more. You must trust yourself. The truth is inside you, waiting to be found. Marcus wasn't sure what that meant, but he couldn't ignore the feeling in his chest. The truth wasn't just about the prison. It was about everything he had known, the life he had lived, the people he had trusted, and the events that had led him here. The answers were out there, but they were hidden, locked away in the minds of the people who had the most to lose. The next day, Marcus was determined to get closer to the truth. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to find out what was really going on, and who was behind it all. But little did he know, as he moved closer to the answers, he was stepping into a trap that had been set for him long before he ever set foot in prison. Part 4. The Hidden Truth. Marcus had made up his mind. He couldn't stay passive anymore. The voice in his head was growing more urgent with each passing day, and the more he listened, the more he realized the truth was closer than he had ever imagined. But every step he took toward the truth seemed to bring him into greater danger. One morning, as he was in the yard, he noticed something strange. The guards were acting differently. They were walking in a line, shoulder to shoulder, scanning the crowd of prisoners like they were looking for someone specific. Marcus felt his heart race. He could tell they weren't looking for trouble. They were looking for him. He quickly ducked behind a group of prisoners who were talking about the daily routine, pretending to join their conversation. His eyes darted around as he tried to figure out what was going on. Why were they after him? What did they know that he didn't? It wasn't long before he heard the voice in his head again. "You're being watched. Stay out of sight." The warning was clear, and Marcus didn't waste any time. He moved quickly, using the crowd as cover, and made his way toward the far corner of the yard where the maintenance shed stood. It was a place that few prisoners ever went, mostly because it was filled with heavy equipment and tools. But Marcus knew there was something hidden there, something that could lead him to the answers he was looking for. As he reached the shed, he carefully pushed the door open. Inside, it was dark, with only a small window letting in a little light. The smell of oil and metal filled the air. Marcus scanned the room, his mind racing. What was he looking for? What could possibly be hidden here? He noticed a box tucked away in the corner, behind some old tools. It was a plain, wooden box, small but heavy. He felt a pull to it, as if something inside was calling to him. He carefully picked it up and opened the lid. Inside the box was a collection of papers. They were old, yellowed with age, but the writing on them was still legible. Marcus's heart skipped a beat as he looked at the first page. It was a list of names he recognized. Names of people who had been part of his life before he was thrown into prison. But there was something odd about the names. They were all crossed out, one by one with black ink, and next to each name was a date that seemed to match the day each person had disappeared from his life. He felt a chill run through him. These weren't just random names. These were people he had known, people who had been close to him, and they were all connected to something much darker than he had ever realized. The door suddenly creaked open behind him, and Marcus quickly closed the box, hiding it under his shirt. He spun around, heart pounding in his chest. It was Officer Gray, one of the senior guards. He was standing in the doorway, his eyes narrowing as he stared at Marcus. "What are you doing here?" Officer Gray asked, his voice low and threatening. Marcus didn't answer right away. He didn't know how to explain the box, the papers, or the strange feeling in his chest. But something told him he wasn't going to get away with this. "I was just looking for something," Marcus said, his voice shaking a little. "I wasn't causing any trouble." Officer Gray didn't look convinced. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning Marcus's face. For a moment, Marcus thought he was going to be caught. But then, something strange happened. He heard a thought in his mind, a thought that wasn't his. "Don't say anything. Just leave." It was the same voice that had been guiding him all along. It was clear now. It wasn't just a random voice. It was someone or something that knew exactly what was going on. But Marcus didn't know who it was, or why it was helping him. Without thinking, Marcus turned and walked toward the door, trying to act normal. Officer Gray watched him closely, but he didn't stop him. As Marcus stepped outside, the voice in his head spoke again. "You found a piece of the puzzle, but there's much more. They're closing in on you, Marcus. You have to hurry." Marcus didn't need any more warnings. He knew that the truth was finally in his hands. But what did it mean? Why had these people disappeared? And what was the connection between them and the prison? As he walked back to his cell, he tried to make sense of the papers he had found. But the more he thought about it, the more questions piled up. Who was behind all of this? Who was pulling the strings? And why were they targeting Marcus? That night, as he lay in his bunk, the voice spoke again. But this time it sounded more urgent, almost desperate. "The truth is dangerous. You're too close. They'll stop at nothing to silence you. Get out now, Marcus, before it's too late." Marcus knew the voice was right. The deeper he went into this mystery, the more dangerous it became. But he couldn't stop now. He had come too far. The answers were right in front of him, hidden behind a veil of secrets and lies. He had to push forward. He had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. But little did he know, the deeper he dug, the more he would uncover about himself. The truth wasn't just about the prison. It was about his own past, and the dark forces that had shaped his life in ways he could never have imagined. Part 5. The Betrayal. The next few days felt like a blur for Marcus. The more he uncovered, the more the weight of the truth pressed down on him. Every time he thought he was getting closer to an answer, another layer of the mystery seemed to unfold, revealing even darker secrets. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was a part of something much bigger, something that threatened to destroy everything he knew. Marcus spent hours in his cell, staring at the papers he had found in the maintenance shed. The names on the list kept haunting him. They weren't just people who had disappeared, they were connected to the prison and to Marcus himself. It was as if every person on that list had a piece of the puzzle, a piece that he needed to put together before it was too late. As he sat there, the voice in his head spoke again, more urgently than before. "They're getting closer, Marcus, you can't trust anyone anymore. They'll do anything to stop you. The voice had always been a source of guidance, but now it seemed more like a warning. Marcus wasn't sure who or what the voice was, but he knew one thing. It was his only ally in a place where everyone else was out to get him. He had to act fast. That afternoon, Marcus overheard another conversation. This time, it was between two of the guards, standing just outside the cell block. Their thoughts were clearer than the others. They were talking about him, and the words were chilling. Marcus is becoming a problem, one of them thought. We can't let him get any closer to the truth. We've got orders to stop him, the second guard thought. We can't let him expose the plan. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. It was clear now. They weren't just trying to keep him locked up. They were trying to silence him. Whatever they were hiding, it was dangerous, and they would stop at nothing to protect it. But Marcus wasn't going to be silenced. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to back down now. He needed to find out who was behind all of this and why they had done this to him. Later that night, he decided to take a risk. He knew there was a secret meeting room in the prison, one that the guards used to discuss matters away from the prisoners' ears. Marcus had heard rumors about it, but he didn't know where it was. The voice, however, had always been one step ahead. Follow the guard with the silver watch, the voice said. He's the key. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. The guard with the silver watch. He didn't know who that was, but he knew he had to find him. The voice's directions had never steered him wrong before. As the hours passed, Marcus kept his eyes on the guards as they moved around the prison. His eyes finally landed on a man wearing a silver watch, Officer Gray. He had been the one who had confronted Marcus in the shed earlier, and now he was walking toward the hallway that led to the secret room. This was his chance. Marcus waited until the hallway was empty and then quietly followed Officer Gray, keeping a safe distance. The guard didn't seem to notice him at first, but as they turned a corner, Marcus slipped through the shadows, staying out of sight. He knew this was a dangerous game. If he was caught, there was no telling what would happen. He followed Officer Gray to a small door at the end of the hall, hidden behind a stack of crates. The door was locked, but Marcus noticed a keypad next to it. He had seen it before. It was the same kind of keypad used to access restricted areas in the prison. He had no idea how to get past it, but then the voice spoke again. The code is 1742. Hurry. Marcus didn't question it. He quickly typed in the code, and to his surprise, the door clicked open. He couldn't believe it. He was inside the secret room. The room was dimly lit, and it smelled like old paper and smoke. There were files scattered across a large wooden table, and several chairs were pushed back, as if people had been sitting there not long ago. Marcus's eyes darted around the room, looking for anything that might help him understand what was going on. He picked up one of the files and opened it. The first page was a list of names, and to his horror, it was the same list he had found in the shed. But this time, the list was marked with red X's, as if the people on it were dead. And next to each name was a note, written in careful handwriting. "We had no choice," one note said. "He was getting too close. We couldn't let him stop us." Another note read, "The plan is almost complete. The prisoner knows too much." Marcus's hands trembled as he read the words. He realized with a sickening feeling that they weren't just trying to silence him. They were planning something far worse. They had been using the prisoners, using him, for something they couldn't let anyone discover. Suddenly, the door creaked behind him, and Marcus whipped around, his heart in his throat. Officer Gray was standing in the doorway, a smug expression on his face. "I knew you'd come here," Gray said, his voice low and cold. "You're too curious for your own good, Marcus. Now you've seen too much." Marcus backed away, but Officer Gray stepped forward, blocking his path. "You've been a problem from the beginning," Gray continued. "But now you're no longer a threat. You're just another piece of the plan." Before Marcus could react, Gray pulled out a small device from his pocket. The device emitted a high-pitched sound, and suddenly, Marcus felt his mind go blank. His thoughts grew foggy, and he couldn't focus on anything. The world around him seemed to blur, and his body felt heavy. "Goodbye, Marcus," Officer Gray said with a cruel smile, as Marcus collapsed to the ground, his vision darkening. The voice in his head spoke one final time. "You were never meant to escape, Marcus. They've been controlling you all along." Everything went black. Part 6. The Final Revelation. When Marcus woke up, he wasn't sure how much time had passed. His head felt heavy, and everything was spinning. The last thing he remembered was falling to the ground, the high-pitched sound taking over his mind. Now he was lying on a cold, hard floor in what looked like a dark, empty room. His body ached, and he could barely move. He tried to focus, but everything felt distant, like he was underwater. His mind was foggy, and he had to fight to remember what had happened. Officer Gray, the secret meeting room, the notes. He couldn't believe it was all real. Suddenly, he heard a voice. It wasn't the voice he had been hearing for weeks, the one that had guided him through the maze of lies and danger. This voice was different. It was calm, but it sent a shiver down his spine. "You've finally woken up." Marcus blinked, trying to see who had spoken. He was still groggy, but the voice felt familiar. Slowly, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a woman, tall and dressed in black. Her face was hidden by a mask, but there was something about her eyes that made Marcus stop breathing. "You?" Marcus gasped, struggling to sit up. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling calm. "I'm the one who's been watching you. The one who gave you the gift." "The gift?" Marcus said, his mind racing. "What are you talking about? What gift?" The woman stepped closer, her voice low and smooth, the ability to read minds. "It wasn't random, Marcus. I chose you for a reason. You were never meant to be just another prisoner. You were meant to find the truth." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as the truth began to click into place. "You were behind all of it." You were the one who— Yes, the woman interrupted, her eyes narrowing. I was the one who gave you the ability to hear people's thoughts. I knew you would be the perfect person to uncover the truth. The perfect person to uncover the plan. Marcus's head was spinning. The plan? What plan? The woman walked around him, her steps echoing in the empty room. The plan to control everything. You see, Marcus, you were never meant to escape. The prison wasn't the end of your journey. It was just the beginning. Marcus felt his chest tighten. What are you saying? What's the truth? What do you want from me? The woman stopped in front of him and looked down at him with a cold smile. I wanted you to know the truth, but not before it was too late. The truth is simple. You were never really a prisoner. You were always a part of the plan. Marcus blinked, his mind struggling to catch up. A part of the plan? What do you mean? The woman's smile grew wider. You've been a pawn, Marcus. A pawn in a game much bigger than you. The mind-reading gift? That was to make sure you could find out what others were planning. To get you to question everything. And when you did, I knew you'd eventually find this place. Marcus's heart raced as he finally understood. So all of it, everything, the list of names, the guards, the secrets, was all for what? To control me? To make me your puppet? The woman chuckled, but there was no warmth in her laugh. Not just you, Marcus. Everyone. The world is run by a few powerful people, and we control everything. Governments, prisons, businesses, all of it. It's all part of the plan. You were just one small piece. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The voice in his head had been trying to warn him all along, but he hadn't fully understood it. He wasn't just a victim of the system. He was part of a much larger scheme. But why? Marcus managed to whisper. Why me? Why give me this gift? The woman looked at him with a pitying gaze. Because you were the one who could see the truth. You weren't meant to stay in the dark like everyone else. I gave you the ability to read minds so you could uncover the secrets that no one else could. But you were never meant to escape. You were never meant to be free. You were always going to be part of this system, whether you liked it or not. Marcus's mind raced as he tried to process everything. So all those people, the ones who disappeared, were they all part of this plan, too? The woman nodded slowly. Yes. They were part of the game. Some of them were helping us. Some were obstacles that had to be removed. But in the end, everyone plays their part. Everyone has a role to fill in the plan. Marcus's thoughts were spinning. He had thought he was trying to expose the truth, but now he realized the truth had been right in front of him the whole time. He had been used as a tool just like the others. His ability to read minds wasn't a gift, it was a trap. I won't be part of your game, Marcus said through clenched teeth. I won't let you control me. The woman raised an eyebrow. You don't have a choice. You never did. Suddenly, Marcus felt a surge of anger. He had been manipulated, controlled, used. The people he trusted, the people he thought he could rely on, had been part of this scheme all along. He had to stop it. He couldn't let it continue. With newfound determination, Marcus stood up. His legs were weak, but the fire inside him burned brighter than ever. The woman's calm demeanor didn't scare him anymore. She had been playing him like a puppet, but now he understood the game. And he wasn't going to lose. "I may not have been in control before," Marcus said, his voice steady, "but I am now." Before the woman could react, Marcus made a quick decision. He reached for the nearest object, a chair, and swung it at her, knocking her to the ground. The woman was taken by surprise, and Marcus didn't hesitate. He ran for the door, his heart pounding in his chest. As he ran, he heard her voice behind him, still calm, still detached. "You can't escape, Marcus. You never will." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He had the truth, and now he had the power to change everything. He wasn't going to be part of their game anymore. The prison walls were no longer just walls to him. They were the last barrier between him and the world outside. But Marcus knew that the real battle had just begun. He had to fight for his freedom, for the truth, and for a future where no one could control him again. And as he stepped into the unknown, Marcus finally understood the true meaning of the gift. It wasn't just about hearing minds. It was about having the courage to think for himself, to break free, and to change the world. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.